The newest twist in the Nolan Arenado trade rumors saga doesn't seem to make much sense on the surface. We'll talk about the new report and what it might mean for the Cardinals' chances to trade him. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Tuesday, November 26th, 2024, and we've got a doozy of a report to talk about today as Katie Woo of The Athletic reporting more information on a potential trade of Nolan Arenado from the St. Louis Cardinals. And the headline for The Athletic reads, "Where Cardinals stand on trade talks with Nolan Arenado, who's open to a position change." That's the key part of the headline there, because what? What's going on here? Nolan Arenado, 10-time Gold Glove third baseman, is reportedly open to a position change, which Katie outlines in her article that, according to her league sources, Arenado would be willing to play first base in order to create roster flexibility for a potential new team. Well, that's not the headline everybody woke up today expecting to read, but let's dissect it a little bit as it pertains to the Cardinals' potential to trade him. I hesitate to say desire, because I don't know that this is necessarily the outcome that anybody wanted, but at this point, I do think it is well within range for the Cardinals to do it, to trade Nolan Arenado. It may not be the deepest desire of the team's heart, but at this point, I do think it's a goal of this offseason to find a match. But it's more complicated than just shipping him off and not really having much care for the details. The devil of this thing is going to be entirely in the details because, A, Nolan Arenado is going to be pretty specific about where he's willing to go. And Katie reporting in that Athletic article today that Arenado will only waive the no-trade clause for an organization that is set up to contend for multiple seasons. And that makes plenty of sense because the Cardinals, it seems as though, are not in a position to do that immediately. And the clock is ticking on Arenado to get that October experience that he so desires. And we can talk about the reasons he hasn't had enough of it in St. Louis, right? There's a lot of reasons behind it. And look, in the last couple of years, Arenado hasn't performed up to his career norms. So you can throw him in the bucket of reasons that the Cardinals haven't been able to get there and do it over the last 24 months. But the reality is, I think Arenado still has something left in the tank. And now is the time to, in his mind, strike and get that opportunity to be on a team that is destined to get where he wants to go, and he wants to contribute to that. The Cardinals are spending less money this offseason. We know the direction. We've talked a lot about it. We'll continue to do so. But for Arenado, it's, all right, where can I land? It's got to be a place that I am going to be joining a contender for multiple years, remainder of my contract. He's got 3 years left on the contract, I believe, 2 at basically full price and then a discount year that was essentially added on as some additional guaranteed money for Arenado to put in his pocket in case, he declines and isn't able to get another big contract after this one. That was a $15 million add-on when the trade from the Rockies to the Cardinals took place. That is lumped into what is still owed. I think it's in the neighborhood of $62 million total still owed to Arenado. Remember, the Rockies are paying like $10 million of the remaining salary over the next couple of years, and then that third year is lumped into it as well. He's in a position where he wants to win and wants to get started with it now. Doesn't want to wait through whether it's a rebuild, a retool, a reload, whatever you want to call it in St. Louis. He doesn't necessarily feel compelled to be a part of it. Now, very clearly, and this is something that we've talked about previously, there's not been any report out there that has said Arenado has demanded a trade or even requested one. It was more the mechanism of John Mozeliak going to Arenado and saying, here's the update on where we're at. Here's where we're going over the next year, next 2 years, over the life of your contract. Does that align with where you're at? We think it probably doesn't. Can we kind of find a landing spot for you and work together to make this happen? I think that was more the vibe of how the Cardinals have approached this, and Arenado is open to it, right? That's the way that it has been consistently reported, and again, makes sense. He'll turn 34 years old in April, getting into your mid-30s. Again, declining production offensively the last couple of years, but still, I think, capable. And who's to say he doesn't go into a winning environment and reload and bounce back. Suddenly he's not the most important or the second most important player in the lineup. He's maybe the fourth or fifth most important player in a contending lineup, and that allows some of the pressure to be removed from his shoulders. Whether you think it should be that way, that he can't perform if he's the number one or the number two guy being relied upon, or whatever. It's not even really the time for that debate. It just doesn't matter, right? You can think about the NBA. Everybody poo-pooed Kevin Durant. Oh, he's got to join the super team. Well, he got his ring, right? So there's no shame in it. It is what it is. And if Arenado feels like that's the avenue for him to get what he's looking to accomplish, then more power to him. The Cardinals just have to find the match. And I believe it was Bob Nightingale that recently reported Arenado is really the only high-priced player the Cardinals are actively shopping this offseason, trying to find a trade for, and that makes sense when you think about how we've talked about Wilson Contreras and Sonny Gray likely wanting to stay. I don't know whether you would classify Ryan Helsley as part of that high-price group where Nightingale says it's just Arenado. I could see the Cardinals being willing to listen on Helsley offers, but I don't think they're out there shopping Ryan Helsley necessarily. Because, look, worst comes to worst. Well, worst comes to worst, he gets hurt and you don't get any value for him. He walks in free agency. That would be obviously the worst case scenario. But if you don't make it a priority to move Ryan Helsley this offseason, you can sell to the fan base, this isn't a rebuild. See, we're just making moves on the margins, and this Arenado thing was the one thing that we had to do because it aligned with where he wanted to go, where we wanted to go with the payroll this year, and it just made a match. But the other thing is the Cardinals aren't just going to do this for their health. They're not doing this just as a salary dump. They want to be able to get pieces that can help them for the future. They believe that Arenado's still got value, and they're going to work to try to find a match, one that he is satisfied with. Again, he's not just accepting a trade to anywhere. He's going to have final say-so on whether a deal gets done involving him. The Cardinals look at it and say, we want pieces that we believe are going to help us, and we're getting a fair value for this player whose rights we have, right? So it's going to have to be a takes two to tango sort of situation, and really three to tango, because it's the Cardinals, it's the trading partner, the other team, and it's Arenado. All three of them have to be into whatever is about to happen. But it seems like there is a willingness on the side of the Cardinals and the side of Arenado to have openness towards something coming to fruition. Arenado, though, because he's not coming off of his best career year, and more likely it's kind of one of his lower ranked career seasons, and at age 33 turning 34, teams are going to look at that and look at the contract and say, well, what are we getting ourselves into essentially if we bring in Nolan Arenado? It's going to be maybe a limited pool of teams that say, yes, we see the upside in giving him a shot to recapture what he's been in the past. We see the ability for our payroll flexibility to match what we're going to be willing to pay him. The Cardinals maybe eat some money, and then we're also willing to pay prospects or young talent on top of whatever we take on in terms of salary to get this deal done and to get Arenado on our team. The position change thing, though, is crazy on the surface. Like, again, Nolan Arenado's value comes from his defense, especially right now where the offense has declined the last couple of years. He may not still be at a Gold Glove caliber level defensively, but he was a finalist this year, and he's got 10 of those things littering his trophy case to show that he knows what he's doing over there at the hot corner. The fact that this story comes out of Arenado is willing to change positions, he's willing to play first base, and in the article it said, or at least less third base, in order to provide roster flexibility for a potential new team. The quote from the article, or the sentence from the article, is that the 10-time Gold Glove winning third baseman is willing to play first base or at least less at third to create roster flexibility for a potential new team. League sources briefed on his situation say. That's Katie Woo's writing for The Athletic. Here's what I think about this. As much as it is a crazy headline and a wild thing to read, it's not completely off the wall that Arenado's camp would want that to be out there. Even if that's really not the desire of his heart is to not play third base. I think he's taken a lot of pride over the years in his third base defense. So I don't think that would be his first choice. Kind of like Wilson Contreras moving to first base, but they want different things. Like Wilson wanted to stay, and the Cardinals said, well, here's the way we can make this happen. Arenado wants, again, maybe not wants to go, but is certainly more open to the idea of getting a World Series ring fitted about 11 months from now. All right, the Cardinals aren't probably doing that for him in 2025. and therefore he's open-minded to what could come next. But think about some of the teams that, okay, if it's his rule, he says, I want to go somewhere where the team is set up to contend for multiple years, right? I don't want to have to be doing this again in a couple of years. All right, who are those teams? Well, like the best teams are, the Dodgers and the Yankees. The Padres could be kind of interesting, reunite with Mike Schilt. I have no idea how Arenado, whether that's a selling point for him or not. I imagine he would be cool with it. Obviously, you talk about Southern California. He's from California, so whether it's L.A. or San Diego, like those are some obvious just jump right out at you kind of spots. We've talked about the Phillies. There's some intrigue about the Red Sox, and like when you think about Fenway Park and how great of a fit that was for Tyler O'Neill last year when he went to Boston, you could see Arenado being very similar. He just hits lasers out to left field, and even if they don't go over the wall, they're going to hit the top of that thing, and he's getting doubles. So the ballpark would be a really interesting fit if the view is that the Red Sox are set up to contend. I don't know if that's Nolan Arenado's opinion exactly. It's a tough division in the AL East for sure. But like you think about some of the organizations that are willing to spend money generally and are set up to succeed in the next coming years. That's kind of the list. It's not to say there aren't some wild cards that could be in there. But those are the names of the teams that would come to mind for me. Okay, I mean, first of all, the Padres, Manny Machado's their third baseman, right? And I don't know exactly that it seems to me the Dodgers would be willing to move off of whether it's Max Muncy played some third base there. I think Kike Hernandez played about half the season at third base this past season, splitting it with Max Muncy. Like that would, to me, still be the most obvious spot. But the Cardinals, they were involved in a trade with the Dodgers in July. They traded Tommy Edman there, and the chief return came from the White Sox for the Cardinals, getting Eric Fetty and getting Tommy Pham. So, like, those teams just traded. Is it that the Cardinals, those are the players that the Cardinals wanted? The Dodgers were willing to trade prospects. They sent the prospects to the White Sox to facilitate the Edman deal. But, like, it's very clear, I would think right by now, the Cardinals would have at least spoken with the White Sox, with the Dodgers last July about some of the names in their system. But it was a smaller scale deal with an Edman, maybe not as high ticket of a price as an Arenado would be. And this time the Cardinals aren't in the midst of hoping they could still sneak into a wild card. Maybe that was the case in July when they added Fetty and added Tommy Pham. So maybe the circumstances now are different, but do the Cardinals have interest in the prospects the Dodgers have? I would have to think the answer to that is yes. What do the Dodgers view? They've got a bunch of pitching. It can't all necessarily stay healthy at the same time. And so what do they want to do with certain guys? Do they cut bait on some of them? If they cut bait on some of them, are you very much questioning as the Cardinals, like why they're so willing to cut bait on somebody? And then you kind of go round and round in circles. You know that the Dodgers front office is really smart. So that's just a fact of what you're going to have to deal with. But Heimblum's pretty smart too. It's not to say that John Mozeliak isn't smart, but I think Cardinals fans have sort of gotten into this mind frame of, oh boy, don't trade with these certain teams, Mo, because it hasn't gone well in the past. And, we know the Dodgers front office is annually tops in the league. Don't trade with the Rays because whatever prospect they're sending you, whatever piece they're sending you, they know more about that player than you do, and there's a reason they're giving up on him. Like that sort of mentality. But I think Heimblum would be involved in anything that happens here. I could be totally wrong. The symmetry in the front office, the synergy may not be there, and it may all be Mo's show. But I don't feel like a franchise-altering move like trading Arenado happens without Heimblum in the room kind of talking through things with Mo, given that Bloom is going to take over the president of baseball operations role, a year from now, 11 months from now. So that's part of it. But like with the Dodgers, is there a match there? Do the Dodgers want Arenado? Do the Dodgers have other big-ticket items in mind first? Juan Soto. That domino, I feel like, has to fall before anything happens with Arenado. Because there could be a bunch of teams that say, we don't necessarily care which one specifically, but we need a big bat this offseason. Like, that's got to be a part of our winter plans, is to upgrade the lineup and to add a marquee player. And if we are unable to secure the first name on our list, maybe that's Juan Soto for a lot of people, then you go on down the list and you pivot, and maybe a guy like Arenado comes into focus more easily, maybe a Paul Goldschmidt for teams that could fit the marquee bat at first base come into the picture. Like there's a number of free agents that I think sit below the Soto tier, and that might have to be the domino that falls. Does it happen before winter meetings, or does the agency for Juan Soto say we want to wait until winter meetings, because that can be when we're really starting to invite those bidding wars, and teams are going to be more willing to go crazy because they can sense a clock ticking a little bit on things, and they want to make sure they get their guy. Like that, I think, has to be the thing that moves the market on the position player side first. And some of the same teams that are interested in Soto but don't land him could then turn and say, we'll trade with the Cardinals and get Arenado because we still think he's a marquee player, and it'll be less of a financial commitment because it's not as many years on his contract, and the Cardinals will probably have to pay down a little bit of the money anyway, but it'll cost you prospects. Like there's always that balancing act that teams are going to go through. But the reason that Arenado would want that out there, or his agent would want that out there, or his, whatever, would be you don't want those teams that think, we're okay at third base, but we love Arenado. He's a great player, but we're kind of set at third. We don't really. No, Arenado, if it's a team that Arenado has interest in, he wants to at least make sure he's being considered by those teams. So you want that out there to say, I'd play first base. I'd clean up the dugout. I'd scrape the bubble gum off the bottom of the dugout bench, like whatever it takes. If there are destinations that he'd like to go, you don't want those teams already having a third baseman to be a limiting factor. Now, you can say that, and then that can at least open the door to a conversation with a team that otherwise might have been counted out. Like the Padres, again, I keep coming back to San Diego because that's the team that I know definitively has an installed third baseman that doesn't get replaced unless like that guy's kind of on board with the two. Like, let's bring Arenado in. I'm Manny Machado. Yes, I'll play I'll play a different position from time to time too. Arenado can play some third. I'll move around. I'm willing to do that because I want Arenado on the team. Or maybe that's not the case, but Arenado doesn't want the Padres to not be thinking about him when it comes to the offseason. And Machado has played exclusively third base the last 5 seasons. It's been since 2019, looking at his stats here, that he has played shortstop. So, I don't know that would even be an option that would make sense. Ha-Seong Kim has played a good amount of shortstop, I believe, for the Padres in more recent seasons. I know Jackson Merrill used to be in the minors, I think, had some shortstop background, but he's been a really good center fielder for them. Finished high up in the Rookie of the Year. Oh, obviously, Xander Bogaerts is another guy. Looking at their depth chart now, I kind of forgot about Bogaerts. And he's a guy that, they signed to that big, long contract, and so that's another impediment. So, it's going to be difficult necessarily, although he played mostly second base. I was just kind of making sure I was up to speed. He played primarily second, played a little bit of short. Kim played a lot of short last year. So, I don't know if Machado would be wanting to move to short or if that's even a possibility. But bottom line, anybody trading for Arenado, as much as I get it from Arenado's side of why wouldn't I want to be willing to, say I'm willing to do anything if I can get to the place that I think I can win a World Series, and I just don't want to have my third base positioning be such a factor that they won't even think about looking in my direction when it comes to a big splash for their offseason. Arenado wants all of those places to be on the table. He doesn't want to be limiting those possibilities, right? And again, you might say that if that's what's going on here, if his agent is leaking that out, his league sources, we don't know exactly who told Katie the information, but it's one of those deals where it makes sense for Arenado to have it out there because that opens up the pool of teams that you might be interested in going to play for, and they could then be creative and think, well, there's another way that we could get Arenado on our team, and that would be okay. I think any team doing it would be wasting Nolan Arenado at first base. I think it's hilarious. That's why I tweeted out, replying to that article in that report, I said, and it would be a terrible idea, anybody trading for Arenado and playing him at first base. Obviously, they should play him in the outfield. That was very tongue-in-cheek if you happen to see my tweet. I think he should play third base wherever he goes because I think almost in every scenario, he's going to be better defensively than, whatever team is picking him up. Maybe Matt Chapman if the Giants are wanting him or he wants to go to the Giants again. I think you would probably not see that given that the Padres and the Dodgers are better positioned in that same NL West for the next couple of seasons, and he wants to go somewhere that he can contend. So probably not the case, but Chapman, of course, did win the Gold Glove this year at third base over Arenado, who was a finalist. So maybe not that. But and even Machado, I am sure, I'll look up the stats for Machado, the defensive metrics, but I would imagine that Arenado grades out better defensively than Machado at third base. But he's kind of the incumbent. It's his spot for the Padres and has been for a handful of years. Looking at the numbers, defensive runs saved, 3 at third base this past year, 5 the year before that, -3 the year before that. And there's obviously other statistics besides defensive runs saved, but Machado is a fine third baseman. Arenado, at least in my head, better, and the numbers bear it out. And not just in defensive runs saved, but he had 6 defensive runs saved this season, although he did play more total games there than Machado did. 1 defensive run saved in 2023. Remember, Arenado had kind of a weird down and up season defensively in 2023. 19 defensive runs saved in 2022. 6 the year before that, 13, 23, 12, 17, 13, 22, 12, 18 on off the sheet prior to that in his career. That's how the guy won 10 Gold Gloves. So I understand that the numbers have dipped a little bit defensively. I still think a lot of the value of Arenado, who had the highest fielding percentage still at third base last year at .977, I would say defense is still a significant portion of why I would be going out to get him. Like, that's why we spent so much time talking about the Phillies. I don't know if the Phillies would want him. I don't know if Arenado would want to go there. I don't know if the Phillies, even if they might want him, would be willing to either pay and or add prospects to get the guy. We talked about Alec Boehm in that situation. Although there is an interesting 3-team trade that was thrown out there. I want to make sure to find this and talk about it. I think Anthony Castrovince of MLB Network, I want to say, was who was credited with this hypothetical trade proposal that was thrown out on the timeline. I saw it from MLB Network. Blockbuster trade ideas for Black Friday. It would involve Arenado going to the Phillies, which kind of along the lines of what we had been talking about in the previous Arenado-based episode, would be, all right, that's a team that's willing to spend. It is known that they want to move on from their third baseman, Alec Boehm, and that's a team that is expected to contend for the near future, right? They're set up well. Would make sense that Arenado would be willing to go there based just surface level. It wouldn't surprise me if that were the case. But here's what Anthony Castrovince, who's a MLB Network writer, longtime senior writer for MLB.com. Here's his proposal. The Phillies would get Arenado. They would also get Ryan Helsley. And we just talked about, I don't know if the Cardinals are shopping him, but if somebody comes to your doorstep and says, here's the Godfather offer for Helsley, you listen. And otherwise, as I was trying to get to, I kind of cut myself off where I said worst case scenario, and then I said, well, no, the worst case scenario is Helsley gets hurt. The other worst case scenario is you're not in the race and you trade him in July, where he's got maybe as much or more value to a contender that might lose a closer to injury at that point, and so they're even more desperate to trade for somebody like Helsley, who would be the most, as long as he gets through the first few months of the season healthy, would be the most prominent reliever on the market if the Cardinals would be willing to move him at that time. But this proposal from Anthony Castrovince says Arenado to the Phillies with Ryan Helsley. For some reason, the Phillies are also getting Emerson Hancock, a pitching prospect from Seattle, in this trade, as well as cash considerations, and that probably would come from the Cardinals. Cardinals giving some money to pay down the Arenado deal in theory. And then the Mariners would get Alec Boehm, and the Cardinals would basically be getting prospects. Luzardo Montes, the number 3 prospect in the Seattle organization, which I'll pull up his numbers so you can get an idea for what he's all about. An outfielder, 20 years old. Looks like pre-2024, Baseball America had him as the 100th ranked prospect in baseball. And he was just at the A-ball level last year, low A, and then up to high A, where he had an 805 OPS. But that was his age 19 season. Luzardo Montes. Excuse me, I think I said Luzardo. Thinking of the Jesus Luzardo, the pitcher for the Marlins. Luzardo Montes, an outfielder. Mick Abel, who is the number 6 prospect in the Phillies organization. And he's a pitcher, but I believe he's had some injury concerns in recent years. Has been on these prospect lists for 4 years now as a top prospect. And did not perform well this past season in AAA. Like, has been a bona fide top prospect, but works his way up, and okay, he's kind of hit a snag. Had a 6.4 ERA last year in AAA, but is still only just turning 23 years old, and was a former first rounder of that 2020 draft. So that's an interesting piece for sure. Again, though, you're kind of feeling like, are we getting damaged goods? What's the deal with Mick Abel? And then another one, the Phillies' number 3 prospect, Justin Crawford. So Crawford, Abel, Luzardo Montes, in a deal that the Cardinals would be giving up some money, Arenado to help pay that contract down, and they would be giving up Ryan Helsley. Interesting. And the skinny on Justin Crawford, he's 20 years old, will turn 21 in January. Outfield prospect, Double-A Reading last season with an 834 OPS at 20 years old. So a couple of talented outfield prospects that would certainly slot probably into the Cardinals' top 10 prospect list. I'd say they would end up anywhere from 5 to 10 maybe on that list. Maybe one of them could be as high as number 4. I would still think that you'd have, I mean, maybe not. Crawford was a number 63 in baseball coming into the year per Baseball America. They'll have to do that update as we roll around to spring training. But had a fine season last season, working his way up to Double-A. Kind of interesting. 2 outfield prospects, a starting pitching prospect that the shine has come off of his name a little bit, but if it's something that he's able to make able, no pun intended there, able to kind of get it back and is just 23 years old, not a 24-year-old till August, it would come into spring training with a chance to earn a job for sure, I would have to think, with the Cardinals. That would be a nice little haul for Arenado Helsley. I would say the money would matter, especially to the Cardinals. How much of that cash considerations being sent to the Phillies would be required of the Cardinals would probably make a difference. But you're talking about, I mean, decent prospect haul. I wonder, though, how much you could get for Helsley alone, right? And if the Cardinals would be doing well, or maybe doing out of convenience to trade Arenado and Helsley to the same spot. And maybe it's something that has to happen if you want to really crack into the upper echelon of some teams' prospects. You're not getting a top prospect for 1 year of even an elite closer. Maybe teams are going, we're not really going to give you one of our top guys for 1 year of a player, especially a closer, right? He's going to throw 60 innings and we may never see from him again, and that's if he's healthy. But if you say, hey, you're getting Arenado and Helsley, and we're going to pay down Arenado, so there's really not a financial constraint, that's a move where a team would say, hey, we're really going all in at this point on making something happen. Now, I would think from the Mariners' perspective, this may not make sense. Emerson Hancock is another pitching prospect that the shine might be a little bit lesser on him as well after some recent struggles, but was once considered a very high-end prospect. They would be giving up Emerson Hancock and Lazaro Montes, their number 3 prospect, to get Alec Boehm, which is somebody the Phillies are known to want to be shopping anyway, and does he have clubhouse questions and things like that? I have no idea whether that's just a Philly thing or if that's an accurate depiction of Alec Boehm. I've said, 28-year-old, I almost think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to bring him right into the Cardinals clubhouse and say, let's see how with a different mix of players and in a clubhouse, maybe Alec Boehm actually turns into a better clubhouse guy than people had given him credit for. Like, I'm not afraid of that necessarily, especially with a team that it wouldn't be ruled by the veterans anymore, the old heads that are in their 30s, which is nothing wrong with those guys, but it would be kind of a young man's clubhouse a little bit more. And with that dynamic, shake things up a little to help a guy like Boehm really come into his own. Maybe, who knows? But everything I've seen is like, all right, the Phillies might be kind of overpaying for Alec Boehm in that instance. But I'm not going to say it would be a great deal for the Cardinals or a smash deal. I'm also not going to say it would be terrible. But you're getting 2 of the Phillies' top 6 prospects, one of them being a starting pitcher. Again, not a perfect prospect profile with the struggles he had last year in AAA, but guys struggle in AAA a lot and then still find ways to straighten things out. And then Lazaro Montes, it seems like a pretty good outfield prospect too, the number 3 from the Seattle Mariners. So I don't think that's crazy necessarily. I don't know that the Cardinals are angling to move Helsley in a Arenado package, but I also can't say it would be a ridiculous notion. So let me know your thoughts, Cardinals fans, on what that would look like. But the whole Arenado potentially changing positions, it's kind of funny. The Cardinals had no first baseman after Goldie walked, and now they've got 2, technically. Arenado's happy to do it, and so is Wilson Contreras, but it seems like Contreras is going to be the one that stays on the roster. Arenado could be shipped off to greener pastures or at least different pastures, but his willingness to play a different position or play less third screams to me as a bat signal of, hey, don't forget about me, Padres. I'd be happy to come there. Don't forget about me, Dodgers. I'd be happy to come there. Don't forget about me, any team that just doesn't want to necessarily make it an awkward thing when they trade for me with their third baseman, because the team can at least have some plausible deniability and say, well, Arenado's willing to do some different things. This doesn't necessarily mean incumbent third baseman that he's going to take your job. Or you could handle it honestly as that team and say, yeah, he's going to take your job, but that's because he's got 10 gold gloves, but you're still going to get to do whatever it is that you do. You're going to DH. You're going to move. Like, there has to be some creativity, I think, on the part of the team that acquires him. But I think that's why that's out there, is that Arenado doesn't want to limit the potential landing spots, especially if some of those landing spots happen to have really good third basemen already. I think Jazz Chisholm played some third for the Yankees, but he's moved all around, so that doesn't seem like it would be a complete non-starter. And as we're talking about the Phillies, like they're a team that has already said, we will try to be moving Alec Bohm, or that's been reported. So I think there's going to be a handful of options. How many of those options are the Cardinals going to be able to tango with? And how many of those teams are going to be willing to send the prospects the Cardinals want to make this happen, or the young talent the Cardinals want to make this happen? They're willing to do it. It's kind of awkward because nobody's demanding the trade, according to the way that it's being reported and discussed. Cardinals don't have to trade him. Arenado doesn't have to be traded. But it seems like that would be the logical conclusion for everybody when the Cardinals came into this offseason as a team that was looking to dice some payroll, and they've accomplished that with some of the veterans that they have allowed to walk into free agency. But there is another big fish to fry, and that could be Nolan Arenado. So we'll see what ends up happening and whether a deal comes to fruition in the next 2 weeks. I mean, you got winter meetings coming around the corner, and we're still kind of working out whether or not I'm going to be able to get there or not and cover those, but hopeful at this point in time. Let me know if you have a business and would like to partner sponsoring winter meeting segments or any time on the podcast. I can tell you exactly how to get hooked up with that if that's something you would like to do. Otherwise, you can continue to support the channel with those channel memberships. You can sign up for those below. Appreciate all of our great channel members here on the Brenden Schaeffer St. Louis Cardinals Writer channel. Grand Slam, Scotty, Dempsey, Debbie, Almir, Tyler, Mimi, Miles, Casey, some of our members recently, and I'll try to do a better job. I want to shout out all the members: Chris Bolt, Salvador, Craig, Ken, Rena, Allison, Dan, Eric, Damian. Love you guys. Ken, Jennifer. What's up, Jen? Like, I want to shout out these people. I want to do a little bit of a better job. My guy, Mark, with Hastings Layers, Premium Eggs, Hunter, The Grave of Einstein, Clay, Shilu, Jared, Brock, Connor, Jared. I mean, the list truly does go on. Darren, Dominic, Justin. Love all of our guys and our channel members. If you guys would like to become a channel member and you haven't already, the link to that opportunity, the link is in the description to the video. All right, thank you guys so much for listening, for supporting the channel with watching and listening and following B-Schaeff Daily on Spotify, everything you guys do to keep me afloat here. Appreciate it big time. Let's have a big off season covering Cardinals talk, and we'll see if the Cardinals can make things real interesting with some of the moves that they could make soon. I think Arenado probably does get traded. Where and when still remains a question. So we'll be on top of it here on the channel. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.